emergency Marsh pod. What is happening? What is going on? The Los Angeles Lakers have acquired Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks. I thought this was a what-if trade scenario when I first saw it, when I woke up this morning. We are doing an emergency pod on it because this is the only time that an emergency pod really, truly, actually makes sense to be an emergency podcast. Rico is joining the show. We're jumping into why the Mavs did it, why the Lakers did it, which is obvious. The reasoning, the justification, all of it here on the Marsh Pod, emergency edition for you on a Sunday morning. All right, we are joined here in the aftermath of one of the most shocking trades in SWBA history by Rico. Rico, this thing hits at midnight Eastern. I'm fast asleep because I'm thinking there's not going to be anything happening before the trade deadline of this magnitude. So in your I know you're out west, so this is right in the middle of a Saturday night for you. Your initial reaction to a trade that I think is maybe the dumbest trade in terms of what comes back in SWBA history.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that this is one of the most, I guess, just head-scratching trades that I've ever seen. I think that initially, kind of going into this, just my thoughts when we were in the green room, just thinking, man, I think that this almost breaks the market, and I'm sure we'll probably dive into that. But man, it was wild. I've watched tons of just people talking about this from the Lakers' perspective and the Mavs' perspective, and man, it is just, it's kind of unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this before. It's incredible.
Let's start on the Mavs side, because to me this, and we're starting to get the post-trade referendums right now by the Mavericks, and they're using a lot of reporters to get their message out right now. Tim McMahon, I think, is probably the most plugged-in guy nationally. He gets the statement. I'm trying to find it here. Okay, this is the statement from Nico Harrison, their general manager. I believe the defense wins championships. I believe that getting an all-defensive center and an all-SWBA player with a defensive mindset gives us a better chance. We're built to win now and in the future. What future? What future, Nico? You've got a 31-year-old point guard who doesn't really stay healthy. He's dealing with a bulging disc. You've got I think actually 32. You've got a 31-year-old center now who's people are most surprised that he's actually healthy for the last 2 seasons. I understand that defense wins championships, but you were 3 wins away from a championship last season with Luka and Kyrie. What world is it that Anthony Davis changes your championship perspective beyond literally just this one season, where I don't even think they're going to be a favorite after this deal to win a championship?
Yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre, and I'm going to throw a caveat to that, because what is the commonality between Kyrie and Anthony Davis? Do you know what they've both done? That, it's just kind of, they've got a link. They've got a link to LeBron James, right?
Right.
With LeBron James, they were able to win a title. Without LeBron James, have they won anything? Right?
No.
So that's what I have to think about as a GM. And I get what he's saying. And I think that Anthony Davis, in a way, he gets what he wanted, because we had been hearing the rumblings of maybe him and LeBron possibly maybe pressuring Rob Pelinka about maybe getting a 5. He wanted to get back to the natural forward. In fact, he said that to Shams, I think, Shams, whatever. But anyway, now he gets his wish. But with the Mavs, this is a deal that I think you're in a right now situation. We're not even talking about the fact that you have Klay Thompson over there. He's not anywhere near where he once was as well. So I'm not sure, what this window looks like, but I think it's very short. And honestly, with the Lakers, look, I feel like that they have just really, maybe they've extended their franchise and they have an out plan. I feel like they just got bailed out in a lot of ways. I think that this might be the Chris Paul trade that got rejected by the SWBA back in the day. All right, so that's my personal. Just start with that.
Yeah, this feels like the reincarnation of the Pau Gasol deal, where the Grizzlies deal Pau Gasol to the Lakers, and the entire league is shocked because now Pau is not the same level that Luka is, but at the time he's a all SWBA caliber center, an all defensive center that goes and forever changes the future of the Lakers next to Kobe, and the league doesn't know about it. And to me, that's if you're the Mavericks, you cannot trade Luka Doncic for a 32-year-old guy who is. I know that the primes of SWBA players are extended, but it is still not to 38 years old, right? Like we've seen Steph go to 36. We've seen LeBron at 39. Anthony Davis doesn't project to be that guy at 35 years old where he's at currently 32. So you're trading for a late prime center with injury history, and you get one first round pick. One first round pick. There are other teams out there with worse situations that you could get better draft capital than you could get out of the Los Angeles Lakers. Like, all roads for me always end up leading back to Golden State. But just let's hypothetical. You call up and Golden State says no to this deal, but Steph Curry in picks is a hell of a lot better than Anthony Davis in one pick. And you're saying you're not canvassing the league to figure out what you can get for Luka Doncic. You got De'Aaron Fox and the Kings sitting there trying to find a way out of it. You're telling me you can't get gobs of picks from the Sacramento Kings right now and get a better player for your long-term future with De'Aaron Fox over Anthony Davis? Anthony Davis is a better basketball player. De'Aaron Fox is the better one right now. Just to me, the fact that you got nothing and you seemingly didn't shop this guy around the entire league to figure out what else can we get to him is a disservice to the talent that you have on that roster.
Look, it absolutely it breaks the market, okay?
Yeah.
Because now moving forward, what we're thinking about, and here's another caveat to it, Gobert, he got 5 first-round picks. Bridges, 5 first-round picks. Luka, one, and it was 2029, I think, or something like that. I got to go back and look at the deal. But 2029, what? So now, okay, so now as we move forward into the trade deadline, you have to ask yourself this. Okay, talking about Golden State's linked to the Chicago Bulls. We've been hearing those rumblings, right? So if we're hearing that maybe the Bulls, maybe they're saying, okay, look, we want a couple first round picks for Levine. We want a couple first round picks for Vooch. I'm not sure. We're not in the front office. We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
But just if these are true, if you're the GM and I'm picking up and I'm calling you right now, you're probably saying, like, you want a couple first? Why?
Right.
Luka only went for one.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, what are we thinking moving forward now in SWBA? I think it just completely just kind of breaks the market. Like, that's where I'm at.
And it's broken in two ways, right? You go back to the Rudy deal, and that one made it, okay, if Rudy's worth 5, then Kevin Durant's worth 10, right? And that was kind of like the immediate aftermath, is your superstars are now your entire draft capital that you're allowed to trade is now required to make a deal. And opposing GMs that are trying to get off of guys, I mean, we've already seen the Jimmy Butler demands and the market really fall out. But Jimmy Butler, how about a second-round pick? We'll give you a second-round pick because if we can do, to your point, one first gets you Luka Doncic and a former All-SWBA, probably going to be an All-SWBA first team Anthony Davis this season. So I can just package like an all-star and a first, and I'm now the market is star. If you're the Lakers, this is obviously a coup. I mean, this is the greatest trade in franchise history since you got Pau Gasol. This is the greatest trade from a receiving team standpoint, maybe of all time, if you consider the fact that you're getting a 25-year-old in his prime, Luka Doncic. And the Mavs are coming out here saying, well, we weren't sure about his health. We weren't super excited about giving him a long-term deal. You worry about that when the guy's 32, when you're dealing with Anthony Davis. You don't worry about that when a guy's 25. And for the Lakers, you have extended the current and you have made your long-term future bright as hell because as soon as LeBron goes off that deal, you're going to have cap space to build around Luka. And just like we see De'Aaron Fox trying to angle his way to San Antonio, teams are going to be trying to angle their way to play next to Luka Doncic because he's the type of generational talent that puts you at the footsteps of a world championship every single year.
And can we add to this, like maybe in terms of where the Lakers might go, I think it gives them more of a pivot as well because, there's maybe some rumblings out there that maybe LeBron would waive his no trade clause, right? Because maybe he wants to waive his no trade clause and somehow, and I'm just kind of throwing this out the air because I've heard this, maybe go to Golden State.
Yeah.
I've heard those rumblings before. So maybe this gives the franchise a true pivot now and they say to themselves, look, we know and we feel like LeBron's not got that much time left. We don't want to be, under the mercy of LeBron, the GM. We're going to go ahead and get ahead of it. And I think they've done that with this move because, like you said, it's LA. You're going to attract key free agents out there. People are going to want to sign up with him. And can we talk about the fact they didn't give up Dalton Connect? They didn't give up Austin Reeves. They still have very nice pieces out there, and you have a coach that has played in this league and had some success. I mean, they really got over on this deal. I mean, I think that this was a win-win deal for the Los Angeles Lakers. I just don't see any way around that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Boston Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are the two proverbial favorites to win a championship, the commonality between them is they have a star at the top in Shea, and pick your star, really, in Boston with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Now, I'm not trying to get into an argument of how big of a star either of those two are, but what's the commonality at the bottom of those rosters is that they go 7, 8, 9 deep. Right? Like, if you're the Celtics and it's like, okay, we get Jason Tatum off the floor, but who comes in? Okay, now it's Derek White. Now we got to deal with Drew Holiday. Now we got to deal with Peyton Pritchard, right? You've got this plethora of options. The Lakers now have a pathway to getting those plethora of options, and it's really the difference between the Mavericks and the Celtics last season was that the star power obviously favored Dallas, but the subsequent pieces hand over fist benefited the Boston Celtics. So to your point, the fact that you got this deal, not only just Anthony Davis, but you didn't have to give up Austin Reeves. You didn't have to give up Dalton Knecht. Two guys that are at worst, in Austin Reeves' standpoint, at worst he's your fifth best player on a championship team. Dalton Knecht has looked really good. He's a rookie, but you have to think at least maybe eighth best player on a championship team. Your roster is well positioned now and into the future if you're the Lakers, where you're saying draft picks be damned. We don't really care because we've got the pieces to build around this team now and in the long run. Let's just, again, stay just right now. Where do the Lakers sit then in the Western Conference? Are they top 4 team? Does this change your outlook on them as a legitimate title contender?
Oh, I don't think it necessarily changes my perception as just where they are as far as title contention. Honestly speaking, you don't have a big, okay, and I'm not really sold on the fact that you're going to get Jackson Hayes back playing at an elite level. I'm not sure that you're going to get Jared Vanderbilt back. I mean, we've heard that he's been floated in multiple deals at this point in time, and definitely some money that I could see maybe the Lakers want to possibly get off of. I think really what we need to really look for is, are the Lakers going to make another move? Because they didn't give up the draft capital like that, they could still get out in the market and make something happen. There's still some, or not free agents, but there's still some trades that could be had for some big men out there. And suddenly this puts you into more of a win now situation. But I think what the Lakers have done is they're going to be competitive when Luka gets back, because I think a lot of people forget he's out with the calf injury, right? And it's something that he's dealt with before, and he's missed extended time. So who knows when he comes back? I mean, when they come back, they're obviously going to be exciting, but are they going to get out of the West with OKC and all these other teams at the top? I don't necessarily see that now, but it just is going to depend on what they're going to do in the next week. We'll get a better sense of the direction that the Lakers are really thinking of. Are they thinking right now, or are they thinking long term? Because I personally think that this is more of a long term build, and they just set their franchise up for years to come. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and the Lakers have proven that they don't need draft picks to make a championship run. I mean, it's the one challenge that I've always had with the SWBA, and I think the league itself has fought with it internally, is that it's unlike the SWFL, where your market doesn't matter, right? You get a quarterback, and you know that quarterback is there for 8 seasons, if not his entire career, because he's there for 5, right? If he's a first-round pick, right, that first overall pick, first top 5, whatever you want to do. He's 5 years, and then you're signing him you're either doing the franchise tag or you're signing him to a 5-year deal, and it's a decade of quarterback certainty. The SWBA doesn't have that. And the Mavericks were well positioned and should have felt like they had that, if you're a Mavericks fan, that Luka's our guy. And this is another example of the Lakers now. They have a 25-year-old you build around, and now you don't need the draft picks. All the picks that you gave up to get Anthony Davis, the one pick that you gave up to get Luka Doncic, doesn't matter. Because so long as you have cap space and you got Luka Doncic, people are showing up. People are going to want to go there because it's also LA. It's a Lakers franchise. It's the biggest franchise in basketball, bar none. One of the thoughts that I had in the aftermath of it was, so we've got, I think Kyrie's got 1-year deal. He's got a player option. You've got Anthony Davis, who I think has 1 year deal left, or 1 year left on his deal. I wonder if the Mavs turn around and they try to deal either of those two guys this summer. Now, to your point, the market is killed on stars, but if you're looking at it and saying, well, we think we're well positioned now and in the future, the future, again, as I've said, I don't think it's there. To me, what makes the most sense, and you would have tried to get more draft picks for Luka if you do it, but dealing those guys this summer, hey, Kyrie, opt in and we'll deal you somewhere else. Let's try to get 2 first-round picks back and maybe a young player. Anthony Davis, we're going to try to deal you somewhere else. We're going to get 1 pick and we're going to try to get a young player out of it. And it's almost like you, and this is not me defending the Mavericks because I still think it's the dumbest trade, but you almost try to aggregate the asset of Luka into a bunch of ancillary deals that builds you to a team of the future. I don't think that's the right way to go, but to me that seems like the only way forward for Dallas that makes any semblance of sense if you're trying to win a championship in the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about with maybe these series of deals and stuff like that, I mean, how often have we seen a star opt in just to be traded, right? Like, we
All the
might
time.
see that coming up. But like, we might see that again with Jimmy, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's a possibility he's going to opt in, and then, the Heaters, we got to do something else. But
right.
with them, the older stars, like I'm trying to think like I can't see it right now. Who is going to really buy in on that deal? Who's going to give
Yeah,
you a younger player back? Who's going to give you that type of draft capital back when you just literally see a 25-year-old, and I think he still has lots of room to grow.
a
We
ton.
could talk about the other noise that maybe why the Mavs maybe pivoted off of him because I think that might be important as well. But I just with Anthony Davis, just what we saw, I don't see that. Like, I cannot see them taking you to a title at any point. I just talked about neither of these players have been successful without LeBron James. I'm
Yeah.
serious. Like, I don't know if we would even be talking about them necessarily the same. Don't get me wrong, they're great players and things like that. But as far as championship status, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that it's going to work for the Mavs as far as making little deals. Like, I think that they've kind of backed themselves in a corner a bit.
Yeah, they're both Robins. I mean, and to Kyrie's point, you want to say you haven't done anything without LeBron. Kyrie hasn't done anything without LeBron or Luka. I mean, you could say, well, Kyrie's been to SWBA Finals last season because Luka Doncic was on his team and he was the better player. So they've both been carried by the MVP caliber. People could talk, and Clutch Sports does a fantastic job of spewing the propaganda on their guys. And Anthony Davis is he's an MVP by definition, candidate by definition, but he's not in practice, right? He's injured too often. He's not a guy that you can rely on. He thinks he's a 4, but yet he can't shoot the ball, so you need to play him next to a stretch 5. And by the way, if you're playing him next to a stretch 5 that also happens to be an elite interior defender, that guy's worth $25 million, and he's on a team that's already said, well, we don't really, like, the best guy I could think of is like Miles Turner, right, in Indiana. He might be the best combination of, like, great three-point shooter and great blocker, but there's not like outside of Victor Wembanyama, but he's not a great three-point shooter. That guy doesn't exist, which to me was always mind-boggling. While Anthony Davis is like, well, I need to play next to a 5. Brother, you are a 5. Like, I'm sorry, but you are. There's not a guy in the league that you can play next to that actually complements your skill set without making the offensive or defensive end look very poor.
And see, that makes me think that there's so much more behind the deal because it's like, was Rob Pelinka just sick of hearing that? Like, is
Yeah,
that one of the reasons why he moved him? Because he's like, look, dude, like, you have to play the 5 because this isn't the first time we've heard this complaint before, I think, from AD. Like, I'm pretty sure we've heard this before. I think this is the first time where he's outright said this again to I think Sham, in an interview or whatever, saying, hey, what does this team need? He's like, I'd love to see us get a 5. And that's where you start to hear more of the reports. But yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like he's going to be playing with Lively. He's going to be playing with Gafford. None of those players extend the floor. All right.
yep.
It's going to bog up the paint. And so for the most part, like, I guess if you're going to be perimeter based, is he going to knock down enough shots? And then you have to think about, well, what does that factor in with Clay coming off these down screens and stuff like that? Are you guys starting in about the same place on the offense? So there's a lot of stuff that I wonder how this is really going to work out. It may look good on paper, and it just may be a disaster when it comes down to it.
Yeah, let's go motivations because I think we've talked just like the reaction to it, right? So motivations of the trade. Obviously, on the Lakers side, you're getting Luka Doncic at 25 years old. You're dealing out AD at 32. I mean, that's a win. It's pretty obvious to figure out why the Lakers did it. I think your point about Rob Pelinka just getting sick of it, I kind of wonder if this is like the first time we see a backbone in Los Angeles to Clutch Sports to say, LeBron, we got you your kid, right? We went out and we drafted your kid. We have dealt with your constant belittling rather of this roster, right? This roster that, by the way, you kind of backed us into a corner on with the Russell Westbrook trade. Like, you forced us to make this trade. We wouldn't have done it otherwise. You forced us to make an Anthony Davis deal and giving up so many assets that if we had just had an inkling of patience, we could have got Anthony Davis for free. We could have just signed him into cap space. But no, you made us get rid of multiple first-round picks. Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, guys that could have filled out this roster. And then you get to your point, Anthony Davis constantly coming out and say this roster isn't any good. And both of them this season have said this roster is not any good. And I kind of wonder if this is just the first time they're saying, LeBron, you're going to be on in 2 years. Your kid is going to get paid $1 million, or we're going to probably ship him off, attach a second-round pick, and get rid of him the moment you walk out the door because he's struggling when he makes his SWBA appearances. He can't play in the G League much better. He's gone as soon as you're gone. And Anthony Davis, we want you to STFU. It kind of feels like the first backbone from Los Angeles to say, we're done. We're done being the Los Angeles LeBrons. We're going to move on from this. You've signed a deal. You've got a no-trade clause. That gives us the political backbone to say, well, we can't trade you unless you really choose where you want to go and nobody can meet that asking price. It feels like that from Los Angeles. The great part is you get the shield of, well, we got Luka, but it also just feels like they're just fed up with this Clutch Sports operation. Maybe it's completely wrong, but that's the outward impression.
Yeah, I mean, so starting with the Lakers, I think that from a franchise standpoint, I think that they made the best business decision. And
Yeah,
I know a lot of people probably aren't going to like that, because you're thinking loyalty and stuff like that. But
sure.
at the end of the day, it's a business, okay? And so you have to go ahead and say, look, this player is not going to be here forever. And you had to just look in the mirror if you were Rob Pelinka and say, as is, we are not winning a title. We're not getting out of the West as is. And so I say this all the time when it comes down to this stuff. Sometimes you got to take about 3 or 4 steps back just to go 10 steps forward. You have a foundational piece in Luka, as long as he's engaged. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yep.
But now you have a piece that's going to get you more free agents. He does not have a no trade clause. That's a key. He doesn't hold all the cards. LeBron holds all the cards here. Like, he is one of 2 players in SWBA that have a no trade clause. Him and Bradley Beal, they control pretty much everything there. And we know that essentially he is the GM, right? And so you have got to get yourself out of that. Just imagine if they would have kept AD at this point. You go on, he retires. You've given up draft capital for a win now situation. You have no youth at this point. You talked about the point brilliantly that they've given up Brandon Ingram, who's gone off to be, I think, most improved player. You've gone off and given up Lonzo Ball. Yes, I know he's hurt, but he's back at this point, in my opinion. I think he's maybe the comeback player of the year. It's my personal opinion.
Should be.
But he's played very well. And then also, too, Hart has played well. He's had some very good success in New York now. And so, look, you've given off too many pieces and leveraged it just for this one player and this, his organization or whatever, just to be happy. Like, you can't do that anymore.
So let's go motivation for Dallas. And I'll say this. I don't think we're not trying to convince anybody that on the Lakers' point that this was the right deal. I think it's going to be universal, unanimous. This was the right deal. AD for Luka in a vacuum and outside of it, right deal. Dallas, though, I think, again, I don't think we're going to have to convince anybody, but this was the right deal. Or excuse me, this was the wrong deal. I beg your pardon. No one is going to push back and say, no, get an AD in the building. But let's try to make sense of it. That's it. Make sense of it. What can we imagine is the motivation for Dallas? And I don't believe their crap about, well, we weren't sure about signing a Supermax, and we weren't sure about his conditioning, and we needed defense. Because is there anything beyond those things that could potentially be the motivation for this team?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, talking about just his conditioning, okay, I just had to look at Zion Williams and his contract. It has to be one of the most bizarre contracts I've ever seen, first of all. And so if you were worried about just the conditioning and everything like that, I think he had a clause built in where 20% had to do with him in conditioning, weight criteria, whatever, 40% if he played 41 games, 20% if he played 51, and 20% if he played 61 or games or something like that. And I mean, he didn't meet the criteria. And so what I'm saying is if the Mavs were that worried, or if conditioning was that serious, Why can't you don't think you could have got him into that kind of
Right.
deal? Like what are we saying here? Like, and so I'm wondering about that, but I think that we have been hearing rumblings about him and his conditioning, so maybe that is an issue. Maybe that is going to come out. And then you talked about before, maybe it was a situation where they were like they got ahead of it. Maybe he went to them and they were talking and he was like, "Look, as is, I don't like it here. I don't like the direction you're going. I'm probably not going to sign." And then they were like, "You know what? And we got to move you right now." Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, that reminds me a little bit of maybe kind of what OKC does. They get ahead of stuff. And
Yep.
so maybe that's what the Mavs ultimately did here. But it's like one of two things. I like, is it the conditioning and kind of his just being locked in and these soft tissue issues and stuff like that? Or is it more something where they just literally fell out because something had to happen between the two sides for the Mavs to make this type of drastic deal? It's just my personal opinion. I think something like that happened.
Yeah, and if that's the case, and I don't think you're wrong, and like I'm gonna come back at it, but I don't think that's the wrong take. But it goes back to the original point. If that was the case, why are you not canvassing? Because there's better deals out there across the league for young all-star caliber talent that better like Oklahoma City. You don't think you could call OKC and be like, what do we think? Jalen Williams and Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and a couple of those draft picks you got? How about it? Let's make a deal. You get Luka, you get Shea, you get two 25, 26-year-old MVP candidates as your backcourt. What do you think? Can we make that deal work? Like, that's what boggles my mind here, is that you seemingly called one team and one team only and said, let's come up with a deal here. Because you're right. Like, if that's the case and Luka says, I don't want to be here anymore, and I saw something on Yahoo Sports where they said there was a much quieter, less forceful push that Luka could be doing than what De'Aaron Fox is doing with Sacramento. Okay, fine. I get if that's the case. But you're telling me you couldn't call 30 teams or 29 other teams and say, best offer. You've got 5 minutes. What's your best offer? And I get you wanted to kind of control it maybe. You don't want that leaking out. And that, of course, does. Because you call 3 teams. One of them is bound to go to the press and say, guess who's actually interested in maybe moving Luka? And now Luka gets pissed and you lose leverage and the dominoes fall. But you're telling me that was the only deal you thought, if I'm going to go hush-hush, it's Anthony Davis and the Lakers? Like, there's other teams with better assets, both player and draft. The Houston Rockets. You're telling me you can't get, Jalen Green and Tari Eason, or maybe you go, hey, we'll do Alperen Sengun and a couple of those first-round picks for Luka? That's not an option on your table? I mean, that blows my mind.
You know what? And it just makes you think, like I said, there has to be something else that just
Yeah,
went on, I think, from the Mavs side. Because, I just talked about the contract, with Zion and the guarantees and stuff like that. Like, have they had those discussions with him and maybe stuff has been breaking down behind the scenes? Like, hey,
right.
this is what your next contract might look like. And we just haven't been hearing the rumblings. Or, was it something where truthfully he was maybe frustrated with, the coaching and just the way that it was going? Like, this is something that I want to hear some more of, because I just don't believe that it just came down to a one night deal where they pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Los Angeles Lakers, do you want Luka right now?" Because it seems like, like you're saying, there is so many more options that you could have taken. Like, man, we hear about De'Aaron Fox, right? Like, was there some? Could you have gotten something done there? I mean, there's a star that wanted out. Like, would he
Right.
have maybe wanted to go play with some players that he could have thrown some lobs to along with Kyrie? Like, I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out there. I got to
Yeah.
look at the salary cap and stuff to see how it matches up. But still, there's so many other options that you have out there. Why this deal, and why only getting back a 2029 pick to go along with it? Just doesn't make sense at all.
And there's going to be a report. It's going to come out Monday or Tuesday. It's going to be a story. Either Tim McMahon's going to write it or somebody on The Athletic's going to put it out. And it's going to say the fracturing relationship that was Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks. And it's going to be a very Mavs-heavy Mavs source. It's going to be anonymous sources or league sources, but it's going to come from Dallas. And it's going to say why this deal happened. And that's fine. We're going to get that, and it might make sense. But the fact remains, that's what you got from it, is, to me, the biggest disservice of this deal. Is just the assets coming back.
And you know why I think it's more on the Mavs than it is the Lakers? Because Anthony Davis is on Clutch Sports. Okay,
Yeah.
and so LeBron is Clutch Sports, and we just talked about how he probably is the GM there. So I'm pretty sure he had wind of it, and he probably signed off on it, and they were probably cool with that whole situation, right? And so that's why I think it's more something to do with what went on with the Mavs than I think it is with the Lakers. Like
Yeah.
I just really think that it's something that went on with the Mavs.
Yeah, and there
I
was
mean, I'd
a
love to.
Yeah, because there was a report that that LeBron found out about the deal while he's at dinner with his parent or with his family after the Knicks game, and he was, according to the tweet, still processing it. Like this is not a group that knew this deal was coming from a player standpoint, from a clutch standpoint, clearly. And from another report, it was that the Mavs reached out to the Lakers earlier this week and were like, "What would you think about a Luka deal?" And it's just, and that shows that Clutch didn't know about it, right? Because if the Lakers got a call from Dallas and they said, "Hey, what would you do for a Luka deal?" and Clutch knew about it, LeBron's not caught off guard. Clutch is doing something. Clutch is definitely contacting somebody in the media if they don't want that deal to happen. And they know about it. They're telling somebody that the Mavs are shopping Luka just so you don't get this out there. And FYI, Shams, I don't know if he still is, but Shams was represented by Clutch Sports. He's a Clutch Sports. His agency is Clutch Sports, which is part of the reason why Shams for his entire career has seen so many sit downs with AD, a lot of information on Clutch Sports athletes. He is a Clutch Sports member, right? So there is that inside information. If Clutch Sports knew about it, Shams knows about it, and that gets out there. So it 100%, to your point, has to be coming from Dallas. We're gonna find out about it. Why, quote unquote. To me, it's still never going to make sense. We've gone long. Anything else, Rico, that we didn't touch on that you think is worth bringing up here?
I mean, like I think we've pretty much touched on it all. We touched on, just the fact of from the Lakers, the Mavs standpoint, and like I said before, we just really now just moving forward these other players that are out there. Like I think that it certainly is going to impact Jimmy Butler. It
Yeah.
impacts Levine. It impacts Vooch. It impacts Jonas Valanciunas. Like De'Aaron, everybody else now that maybe wanted to be dealt or teams are really thinking about dealing. I just cannot wait to see what the rumblings are going to be like Thursday. I want to see what the market is for these
Yeah.
players now that you see this deal happen. And then how does Utah continue to be involved in these deals in some way, shape, or form,
Right.
picking up picks and things like that? That is just, I mean, I don't know how Danny Ainge figures this stuff out.
And interestingly, Utah getting involved almost like they own the Lakers 2027 top four protected first. Like, why would you want to make the Lakers better in 2027? So it's fascinating that they're involved and almost lessening the value of the asset that they have. But they have so many first round picks, they'll continue to acquire them. All right, Rico, look, I appreciate you taking the time here early on a Sunday morning to break down everything that was the chaos that has enveloped the league last night. I'm sure we'll chat again on SimWorld today and other spots, but appreciate you taking the time here last minute and breaking down the most shocking deal in modern SWBA history.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure talking basketball with you, man. Thanks a lot for having me.